Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rich Sutter, Pete Coles, and today we have a special guest, Vlad, with us. We'll get into Vlad just a few seconds, but it's a rare Friday taping for the boys in the house today, and we are pumped, excited, because we've got a full agenda, Pete. No way we make it through it today. Okay, but for the first time today, we have Vlad, and we just want to let everybody know he is available for casual dating at this time. And
We haven't checked on that.
he's working within the zone right now, so he's got instant credibility right now. It's a bit of a hot stock, folks, so I jump in really quick on our man Vlad. He's handsome, he's talented, and he's got all the skills that you need. Okay, there we go, Vlad. If that doesn't help, I don't know what does. Okay, so we have also just a quick Feed 'em Fish shout out, because this gentleman I know from way back home, and every week when I go out on the social media stuff, every week when I'm out there, he goes, "Why don't you talk about me on the show?" And I said, well, first off, you weren't a basketball player. And so we're going to give him a quick shout out, though, at the beginning of the show here. We used to refer to him as Yeast, okay, because he wasn't a very good basketball player. But in the Bronx League and Manhattan leagues that I played in softball before I moved up here, he was absolute best softball player that I had ever seen. Played against him many times, and I've never seen a guy hit the ball like this. So today, early on, Yeast gets a shout out from In the Zone, and now we want you to go away and don't come back. Okay? So for all the folks down in Manhattan, they know who I'm talking about, and we love them. But we gave him a shout. Now we're ready to move, Pete. We're ready to move. Today is just enormous amount of what's going on in the basketball world.
We
today.
starting with pros or we starting with college?
Let's jump into the pros, because if the Damian Lillard, a little music here.
Yeah, I'm celebrating our holiday
Nice.
with the green.
Giroux. I love this. Pete came out of the woodwork with this one. Wow, I like this. Okay, so if the Damian Lillard trade was an earthquake by NBA measures, and,
Yep.
and it was, sometimes you have plate tectonics that keep moving and aftershocks that keep moving. So the Giroux holiday to the Celtics is now the focus of In the Zone right now. So the Celtics have really put an emphasis on making this a championship caliber team.
Yeah.
Their off-season moves, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, they've been aggressive, and they've been driven towards putting this team as the Eastern Conference champion.
You were questioning whether they had a plan, and now it seems like the pieces are starting to fall into place where they might have had a plan, or they're getting lucky.
I think I'm going to go with you in your original. I think they had a plan all along. And I knew the pieces. I think they knew the pieces. We mentioned Malcolm Brogdon here before. I think they knew the pieces that they were going to try and move in order to do that. But they sent Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon and a number one pick in the draft, which used to belong to the Golden State Warriors, now belongs to Portland. And so what you see at Portland with the remaining players that they have the new talent that came in through the draft, really good young talented players, Shaedon Sharpe. And so they seem to be patiently building towards the future, while the Celtics seem to be saying, let's try and get this done right now. And what has enveloped in the Eastern Conference, has turned out in the Eastern Conference, has been really exciting a little bit to watch without even playing a game, is the Milwaukee Bucks' response to that and their desire, their ability to move some players and wind up with what they think is, and what a lot of prognosticators think is, the best team in the Eastern Conference. So right now, I don't know that there's a real dispute over who's 1 and 2. It's kind of like the college basketball world where we have Duke and Kansas. 1 and 2, you could have one as 1 and the other as 2, and you could flip-flop them. But I don't think there's a lot of consternation about who is 1 and 2. And now in the Eastern Conference in the NBA, with this trade, the Celtics, looking at their starting lineup right now of Jrue Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Porzingis. Now, what might also have to happen is for them to make some other moves here to find a center to fit into that. but maybe not. Maybe not, because with that talent that you have right there, certainly you don't need an offensive center. You certainly need somebody who can rebound, block shots, and probably run some pick and roll action. But absolutely, off the charts move right there by the NBA. The two bang bang moves really created some excitement, some synergy. And Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN has been all over this from the beginning, and pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff.
Brad Stevens was almost giddy coming out of their first training camp practice.
I would be happy
Giddy.
if I was him with the team they have. I would be happy with what he's done. I think your goal as a general manager is to improve the product, and Brad Stevens was a really good basketball coach, and as general manager, there's been some mixed reviews on him. But I said, you have to be patient and wait to see what all of the movement is about, what all the plate tectonic shifting is about.
Yep.
And now maybe they have one more move, but right now, I would be pretty excited if I was a Celtic fan too. I think it'd be a good year in Boston. Okay, so the NCAA Division I Council has also jumped in, and they have given the portal a little bit of redefinition. Okay, and this goes under the hoodoo category, as in, who do you think you're kidding? So they amended this thing to 45 days. You get 30 and 15. All different sports have all different ways of approaching this thing. It's really just another third down punt by another NCAA subcommittee council that now has this somewhat control over what's happening, and just another joke. The portal is, again, it's always the response to something that wasn't going well before. Transfer situation before was difficult for players and more aligned with the interests of the school and with the coaching staff. That was a given. Okay, but now the movement towards wide open West portal and having everybody in there, 45% of the portal goes no place. 6% of the portal drop out completely. And so that's what the portal has shown us, is that there's a lot of bad decision making being going on in the scholarship process of Division I. But at the end of the day, now you've kind of shifted this thing all the way over to advantage the players. And I'll give you a quick example of how that shows up in real life. So years ago, the ACC, which was really, really thought of as the number one brand in college basketball for years, the North Carolina-Duke relationship has given them a brand that's really, really been something special, exciting, and probably number one. So they used to have a rule that said if you transferred within our league, you had to sit for 2 years.
Wow.
So there was a real deterrent against that. And again, people would talk about the fairness of that, from a player's perspective. Hey, you went to North Carolina, made a mistake, but now you want to go to Duke and you have to sit and give up 2 years of your career. It was obviously a deterrent. But now what's happened is Notre Dame loses 2 players, and they're both going to play against them right now. Cormac Ryan transfers to North Carolina, and he'll play against Notre Dame this year. Spradling from Notre Dame as well. Terrell Spradley went from Notre Dame to Pittsburgh, and now plays against his older teammates right now. That was kind of the reason and the rationale for wanting to have at least 1 year of sit time, is because especially on the in-conference stuff, that creates a lot of bad blood if you have a lot of in-conference transferring.
Yeah, sure.
Right now, it just seems more like business, so I don't know how much bad blood is involved in it. But I don't think it's going to be too easy for some of these young men. I know they haven't probably given the full spectrum of consideration, and at the end of the day, maybe it doesn't matter. But you're also going to have to go into your old arena, and you're going to have to play against your former team on your old arena's floor. And I think that would be a range of emotions, but also I don't know how you're going to get reacted to by those fan bases as well. I wouldn't necessarily think you're going to get the red carpet rolled out for you.
With people being sucked into their own devices and kind of being a little narcissistic, do they really care? Do they care? Or are they treating it as a business at 19 years old?
No, I don't. I'm with you. I don't know if they care. I don't know if it's a highest level of priority.
Yeah.
But I also think that they're probably a little more forgiving, noting that there's a business side of this. Their understanding it is probably he got a better NIL deal. So on that level, everybody looks at it like that and says, okay, he benefited himself, he benefited his family. We're all on board with that. But at the end of the day, it still has to have a range of emotions associated with it, certainly for the players who didn't transfer.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about this in a very few minutes because that's going to enlarge the most segment of our section is going to be enlarged in that area of trying to kind of put a rationale to what exactly did happen. And rather than go play by play, person by person, he went to this school, he went to that school, they did this, they did that. I really just put it in a mathematical perspective. And what I went through is a listing of who left the program, who's back in the program, returning to the program, and then who might be new to the program that came through the portal NIL system that might really be advantageous. Okay, so we looked at that, but what we're really looking at is if you want to tell how your team is going to do this year, given you have a static set of other things where you haven't had a coaching blow up, you haven't had a number of different things going wrong in your program, then, if all things being considered, if you can say, hey, we return X amount of points to our lineup, that's a good thing. If you say, hey, we lost 76 points out of our lineup, that's a bad thing.
Yeah, right.
And then when you look at what's new at the bottom, you're going to find out that, at least in my analysis, there's very little portal stuff going on that has tremendous impact on any of these places. Most of it is piecemeal stuff where the bigger schools are picking up players that they think can be a piece, that they think can be an addition. It's like Kentucky taking the young man from Davidson last year. He was at Davidson, a star player, wound up going over to Kentucky and did okay over there. But, it's these more of these piecemeal arrangements than they are this big Hunter Dickinson deal where he's going to go into Kansas and possibly have some impact on the national championship. Okay, so we're bouncing around here, but Harden to Harden, one of our famous topics here. It's Harden to Harden. All right, so you have James Harden in your organization as the 76ers. He has publicly come out and called Daryl Morey a liar, who is the general manager of the 76ers. Probably not a good career move.
Yeah, that's not a great idea.
He did not attend their 76er media day. And of course, when you do that, what happens is you become the topic of conversation rather than having the team be the topic of conversation.
Yep.
And so that's a little bit selfish on his part. They're under contract. The checks are cashing. You show up for media day, whether Daryl Morey lied to you or not. If you're asking for a trade, then that sometimes takes time. And until you get traded, then you are supposed to do what you're supposed to do, in my opinion. Okay, they want to trade him, I think, but I don't know exactly, how valuable his market is right now, especially having called out the general manager. Right. Do you think another general manager is going to be excited to bring this guy on and possibly deal with some of that stuff? I mean, if you have issues with people, there's other ways to do it than on social media. Right. And I'm sure him and Morey have had some conversations about their past arrangements and their past differences, but taking it out to social media, I think, ignites it to a different level. And at that point, maybe he did it intentionally because at that point, then he knows he's got to go. I think he knows he's got to go.
I would think, why wouldn't you get the owner involved at some point before you go to social media about it? You know what I mean?
Maybe he did. Maybe he went through all the proper channels, or maybe he's just thinking this is the fastest way out of town.
Well, that's true. That's definitely true.
But Pete, the rationale of that isn't strong, because the fastest way out of town isn't to tear up your present employer and give your new employer the fact that you just into tearing people up publicly. I don't think that's a good career move. I don't think that's going to bode well for him. And I think it also made
sports players. I swear to God.
Did it make him harder to trade?
Oh yeah.
So at the end of it, that's the
because he's
measurement stick.
because
It
he's
made him
not he
harder
doesn't
to
have
trade.
doesn't have the talent level to where people look past the attitude problem.
And he's been around a long time now. There's a lot of really good young players that are coming into this scope that you as an organization can focus on. And guys like that, sometimes they just disappear.
Yep.
He's talking about going to China. Might not be a bad move right now. Devin Vassell from the Spurs. I wanted to just read this one out quick. He's a good forward. Came out of Florida State. I really like his game. He just signed a contract, and I wanted to give a comparison to Jaylen Brown. Really good contract, but this poor man has to now be compared to that contract. And so, this, even though they gave you $146 million over 5 years, it looks like you're poor by NBA standards. So, good contract for the young man. No, the Spurs locking him up for 5 years. I think he's going to be a good pro. I think he's going to be solid. He's got size. He has athleticism, and he fits into that category for me. Where a little bit of a money ball player, where he can shoot the ball, he can handle the ball, he can pass the ball, rebounds the ball well. He shows up in quite a few categories well, and I think that's a pretty good pickup for the Spurs, given the fact that they have Wembanyama, who will be under contract for at least the first 3 years at minimal money before they have to really re-up and think about signing him to a long-term contract. I think that's really good move by them to solid up their lineup like that. John Calipari, University of Kentucky coach, to be given the John Wooden Coaching Award. Pretty prestigious award for Coach Calipari. Kentucky has opened up in Canada. They have some young, talented players, some mixed bag of players that return as well. A lot like everybody else these days, they're trying to see if they can make it all work. And a trip to Canada probably had a really good impact on the team, probably in general, because you get out of the States, there's probably not a lot of media attention on it up there, and you get to play some competition up there to really figure out some things and to see where your lineup fits and to see where your there's chemistry we talk about on this program all the time.
Yep.
And when I was thinking about it on my way here, I was thinking about, let's break down chemistry also. You have locker room chemistry, and you also have basketball chemistry. And locker room chemistry can come a lot faster than basketball chemistry does. That's why when you see Doncic and these guys talking about Kyrie Irving and building culture and building chemistry, it's because it doesn't come overnight. It doesn't come overnight, especially in a game where there aren't the agreed set of principles in it that there used to be. So in basketball, there used to be a much more agreed, rock-solid set of principles that everybody in the league adhered to and agreed to. Now there's way, way more variables moving around, and it's much, much more difficult to get people to come around to the core fundamentals of the game. What are they?
Yep.
What are the core fundamentals of running a basketball organization? What are the core fundamentals of expressing that to the public? And so that's the thing that really, really, I think is the challenge upcoming for that little triad of ESPN, college basketball, pro basketball, and how we execute on that and how that moves, because people are interested in it. I really know they're interested in it. I just hope we don't take it a different way. Husky horror, Pete. We've got some Husky horror.
Uh-oh.
The Huskies are howling. They're howling at the moon right now, and I don't blame them. Donovan Clingan is down with an injury. It's a foot injury sometimes that you'll see with players 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot. They have lower extremity issues. They have problems with their feet and with their ankles. And this is a 1 month setback for the UConn Huskies, but it's going to cost some game time, most likely. Going to slow him down in his level of stamina and training, although they have some really good stuff now where you can train a little bit, but not being able to use your foot is going to knock him out of a little bit. So there's Husky horror for you. I thought him, with Zach Edey and with Filipowski and with some of the other good bigs that are around there, I thought it would be a really exciting year. I think it's still going to be. Wish the young man a quick recovery. They have great staff down at UConn for that type of stuff, so I'm sure he'll be back with us as fast as he possibly can.
Well, and that might not be a bad thing where he comes in a little bit later in the season, too.
Yeah, I mean, he'll come in rested. He'll come in without the rigors of having been through the postseason, preseason. You have that little bit of preseason stuff, and then when the postseason of that preseason starts is practice. Mm-hmm. That's when you start going 5-on-5, full contact drills, and really, really getting after it in practice to see where your group is at, and it's an exciting part for coaches as well. But again, when you get something like this, now you're going to have to really rely on your depth, and hopefully your depth is there at UConn. Bronny James update along the same vein. His dad spoke out last week about it and said he's not ready to go right now, but will be ready to go this year. So that's an interesting piece of information for USC folks. They have some really exciting young players out there. I thought Bronny James would take a little bit of the load off some of the other players there. So if he gets back and he can get back for their conference play, I think that'll be really, really good. So we've talked about this conference alignment a lot, but I wanted to just give a little bit of what does it really, really look like moving into the future. We look at what do all these teams look like, what do all the rosters look like, what do the conferences look like as well. So the Big 12 is really making a power move in the super conference vein. All right, so you used to have, they're called the Big 12 for a reason because they used to have 12 teams. They were called the Pac-10, then the Pac-12 for a reason because that was the number of teams that they had in their league. So I don't know that they're going to go to the Big 18 right now. But they have 18 teams now in the Big 12. So obviously a name change could be on the horizon. But just listen to what happened and then think about some of the ramifications on the other side of that. All right? So the Big 12 right now is adding Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. Now that's 3 teams from one conference. Deion Sanders will be moving his football team over to the Big 12, and I think Kelvin Sampson kind of alluded to that from his Conference America days. You know, the Big 12 is a little different, and now with adding 18 teams, you're probably just going to go through every team once and form a 17 game schedule that way, or they have a hybrid model, but that's going to be a little bit difficult. You know, from a conference, you'll probably split them into divisions.
Yeah.
Assuming, but then you're really forming 2 separate conferences, in my opinion. And what was the sense of adding all these teams? But now you're going to also in 24-25, that's when those 4 teams are going in. The very next year, you're going to add 4 more teams. And I question some of what they're doing here. I'm sure television has a lot to do with it. So they're adding Houston, as previously mentioned. They're adding BYU, which I don't get at all. They're adding Cincinnati and the University of Central Florida. So basically, they're just looking for TV markets at this point. University of Central Florida represents Disney, Orlando, middle of Florida area. That's a really, really good TV market. People love going to visit there as well, right? People want to go to games there. People want to be in that warm climate for basketball. So I think that's pretty good as far as what they've done for themselves. But I just don't know what the conference, what that brings to the conference. UCF all the way to Arizona with your bocce team isn't going to be that great. I can assure you that. Okay? The super conference is what we're alluding to here. And this is what, I don't know, maybe I'm just Pollyannic. Maybe I'm just a little bit crazy. But I get a little bit upset when all of the time big eats little. Little doesn't win anymore. Mm-hmm. There's no more underdogs. Big eats little all the time. There was a nice old lady in my neighborhood back in the Bronx, and one of the first people to open up a video store. And she was so proud of her store, worked tirelessly to put in good movies for people to watch. And that was when the VCR first came out. Oh my God, that changed date night completely in the Bronx. It kept half my softball team home on Saturday nights when we played on Sunday mornings. So it was a beautiful thing. But then that poor old lady got eaten alive by Blockbuster Video, because Blockbuster Video was aligned with Hollywood. Blockbuster Video had celebrity endorsement. Blockbuster Video had 7, 8, 9, 10 copies of the movies that everybody was looking for. So when you went into the little old lady's store and that person had gotten in there before you, like at the library, and taken the only copy of that out, now all of a sudden you have to look at another movie. And that was actually productive for people because now you're going to watch more movies that way. And you're going to watch movies you never thought you would watch, and that was good. But then Blockbuster comes along and bang, they just swallow up every little video store that was around there, and out of business they went. And there was no way of slowing it down. You know, it just happened overnight. And so you look there and you say, wow, you know, and then you go back and you're at the bar with your buddies and going, yeah, the little old lady just closed her video shop. And you sit there, wow, you know, you know, while you're sitting there with a Blockbuster bag full of 3 videos loaded on the bar to go home and watch, you know. So I guess we all have our little participations in this. But then Blockbuster Video gets eaten alive by Netflix.
There's only one Blockbuster left in the country. It's in Oregon.
One. And it's in Oregon.
Yep. Bend, Oregon.
So, I mean, I just wish little one once in a while. That's
Yeah.
all. That's all I'm saying. And that's what we used to get out of sports.
Yep.
Was the opportunity for a little guy to be, you know, the FDU, the UMBC. That's what people love, the tournament. They love that Cinderella run. And now, you know, I think that that's going to be. I just wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't that way. And what it says to me, which really, really is disappointing to me, is it's about control, because it's easier to control. That's why we used to have a lot of media companies in this country, and now we're down to like 3.
Yep.
You know, and everybody is surprised that the message is the same. How could they get that message the same? It's only 3 of them.
Right.
They own everything.
Yep.
And so the message goes out. I refer to the media these days sometimes as the Hakawis. Okay? Do you remember F Troop? Okay.
Yep. Vaguely. Yep.
And there was this scene in F Troop where they had a fort, you know, full of soldiers, and there was this Indian group on the other side, and they used to have these different conflicts, or, you know, nothing ever broke out. It was just a comedy show, and it was really, really good. But the troop was called the Hakawis, and when they wanted to communicate with the fort, they had one guy at the fort that could read smoke signals. And so the Hakawis went with the blanket, and the chief would turn to the guy with the blanket and go, send out X, Y, and Z. And up went the blanket, and the guy would read in the sky, X, Y, and Z. That's what the media is today. Mm-hmm. They're just the Hakawis with a blanket. They're just getting told what to send out, and the message goes up en masse. I wish it wasn't that way, but I think that's why there's a lot of little good stuff happening in the media with people that's really exciting and good. So that's our conference realignment shot for the day. It's easier to control. It's going to be easier to funnel the money, and it's going to be easier to do a lot of things. Really, before we jump into the basketball front of it, I wanted to go through a couple of quick coaching changes. We went through our whole list last year. We gave them grades. We did everything. Here's the 7 or 8 that make it the most interesting. These are the ones that are going to have the most impact on their programs. A lot of them are just, this one goes to this one goes to that one, and you go through it all. But Rick Pitino was at Iona, goes to St. John's. That's the #1 impact coaching move of the year. That will benefit St. John's for a number of years to come. We'll set them back up as a program and put them back in national prominence. And to be honest with you, as a New Yorker, as a guy who grew up loving St. John's, loving the whole Garden vibe, everything about that, I think St. John's is kind of an integral part of college basketball scene. And so for them to have hired Pitino and now kind of guaranteed themselves that they're going to get St. John's back up there, get the Garden rocking again, get that Big East tournament smoking again, I think this is a big piece of it. And I think it has a lot more to do with him just becoming the coach. I think this has a lot of different machinations that are going to occur in the college basketball world as well. It's like bringing a good basketball team back to New York is like putting the wolf back in Yellowstone National Park for the basketball world to me. Ed Cooley was at Providence, went to Georgetown. Now, Ed Cooley had a great run at Providence, was from Providence. Was this a good career move for him? I think time will tell that. But right now, he had a really good team at Providence, and he's walking into a Georgetown team that's not so good. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Micah Shrewsbury was at Penn State. Very short amount of time at Penn State. Mike Bray retires, gets pushed out, gets sent down the road at Notre Dame, call it whatever you want, and they bring in Micah Shrewsbury. They have an absolutely devastated roster at Notre Dame right now for basketball. I hope their football team continues to do well. I hope their quarterback's given some Heisman consideration so that will give the Irish a nice distraction from what's coming on the pending basketball season for them. Okay, their first trip through on the ACC is going to be devastating. They may not win an ACC game. I'm going to put that out there right now. And so people will be able to go back, look at the show, and say, Coach says, may not win an ACC game with this roster. If he does, he'll be doing some job. Kim English, okay, he was at George Mason. I thought mixed results there. They brought him in to replace Coach Cooley at Providence. Now, he has a pretty good roster going in there. Took a couple of players with him from George Mason who were familiar with his program, much like Tobin Anderson was able to do when he was at St. Thomas Aquinas College and he moved to FDU. He took several of his players with him because they know the system, they know what to do, they know how practice runs. Those can be your on-floor leaders because they know exactly what you do, and the new team has no idea what you do. So that can be valuable. Leaving George Mason, it's a good career move for him. I just didn't think he had accomplished enough at George Mason to warrant a job at Providence. Okay, Adrian Autry to Syracuse. Coached against Red Autry. Loved him as a player. He's been with Coach Boeheim a long time. He's a Syracuse royalty player. He's one of the greatest players in all time history of Syracuse. So going that way is certainly a valid look. But again, this is another young man who's never coached a day in his life, who's now getting one of the storied programs in college basketball. And I guess what happens is if you just put enough of the people, because now you'll have Shire, Hubert Davis, a bunch of guys in that ACC highest level who never ever coached before getting to that level. I guess if they just indoctrinate the league with enough of those players, then it won't have as much of a difference. But if you're going to leave Rick Pitino around and Bill Self around and these other guys around, and they're going to go at some of these young coaches that haven't never coached before in their life, your team's at a decided disadvantage from jump one. Absolutely. So in Syracuse, if they get roughed up with St. John's now in one of those garden contests, which they don't play anymore because they're not in the same conference, but if they were to schedule an out-of-conference arrangement there, you're now looking at a different set of scenarios there. You're looking at a completely different set of scenarios. So again, I wish Autry well. I hope he does well. He's a Bronx guy, went to St. Nicholas of Tolentine, played with Malik Sealy, God rest his soul. Brian Reese was another great player who went to the University of North Carolina. And Sealy went to St. John's. Red went to Syracuse. And Reese went to the University of North Carolina. I don't know that the Catholic High School League in New York's had a better threesome than that in their triumvirate in a collection of three really, really good players. I think if you have to go back and I'm sure there's some people now who might, because I'm going to post this on the show, I think that might be one of the best 1, 2, 3 punches ever to play in New York basketball. So anybody out there, because the other day I put a top 10 point guard list up on Twitter, and everybody came out of the woodwork with some really, really good stuff, like Tiny Archibald. I didn't have him on the list because I didn't really see Tiny Archibald in high school. Many of the other guys, I had seen them play in high school, and that's how I kind of formulated my list. Saw them play in college, and that's how I kind of formulated my list. But the feedback on it was awesome. So let's get fired up about this one as well. Josh Eilert took over for Huggy Bear when Huggy Bear bit the Bud Light bullet. And now you're going to see tremendous pressure on this young man to produce. They have a decent team, but they do have some key components that lost. One of the reasons for hiring Josh Eilert as the interim coach was because he had good relationships with the players. That really didn't pan out, or maybe he does have a good relationship with the players, but Trey Mitchell left and is now at Kentucky. They have some other really key components of that team that aren't there right now. And coming into it, again, this young man's never coached before in his life, coming into a major conference with a pretty good team. I think the pressure's on him significantly, and we'll have to follow that. I wanted to give you number 8, and everybody will get a real kick out of this. Chris Beard, fired from Texas for allegedly assaulting his domestic partner, and now gets hired by Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi. Sometimes you just got to write this stuff down. Sometimes you just got to write it down because in reality, you just shake your head sometimes. There was another guy back in the day, Tick Price, and he moved around from school to school to school after one disaster after the next, and you just wondered how he kept getting jobs and how he kept getting hired, and that's kind of the same thing. There's a lot of coaches out there, folks. There's a lot of really good coaches out there. Do your diligence and find some really good young coaches. Because this doesn't really look good for any part of the game. It doesn't look good for Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is having pretty good success with their football program right now, and I think their basketball team's not that bad. Okay, so we're going to jump in really quick, and we're going to go through some of the major teams around here in the ACC, in the Big East, and we're going to go out, back, and new. So out is who's gone. Back is who returns. New is anything that's coming in, or just kind of a look at what's coming in to kind of go, wow, oh my God, 9 new guys. So you're going to really see some shifting here, and this is where I think if you're a fan and you're excited about your team or you're nervous about your team, listen to these numbers and you'll be able to get some rationale for it. All right, if you have a lot of points returning, you're going to be in okay shape. And if you have a couple of new pieces coming in, you're going to be in pretty good shape. If you lost 72 points, 56 points, 60 points, it could be rough. And so that's what I'm talking about, where these losses don't seem to kind of equate to what's coming into the program. And it's interesting to see because I don't know how it all equates out. Does this help mid-major schools? Because they're losing some of their players, but they're keeping their program integrity. So let's look. Boston College Eagles. Everybody loves Boston College. The Eagles went to the ACC many years ago. Probably a good move for their football team, but it's been a disaster for their basketball team. I know somebody saw them practice this week, said they have a good squad. They're possibly an NIT team. I don't want to get any of the Eagle fans' hopes up. They want to think about an NIT, NCAA. That's not going to happen this year. Okay, your team's not going to the NIT, and your team has zero shot at going to the NCAA. All right, here's why. Out, and maybe this can help them, but they lost 30 points out, not that bad. They bring back 52 points. That's pretty good. But in the people that they brought in, the new people that they brought in, there's really not a whole lot of significance in there. That's ACC caliber. You make your head and shake and say, "Oh, he's going to be." It's not like a Cooper Flagg recruit. It's not like one of the Boozer twins. It's not anything like that. It's just a bunch of guys who might turn out to be okay, might not to turn out to be okay. And I think the whole thing for BC is in their recruiting. The whole thing for BC is in their recruiting. If they can't get some of the local talent that's really good right now to stay home, they're going to have some problems. All right, Clemson Tigers. Here's one where a little program integrity might be occurring. Out is 29-6. Back is 50.8. Pretty good. Here's something new for Clemson fans, and I think it was kind of I don't think it had anything to do with the coaching change at Syracuse, but they went from having Joe Girard, who averaged 16 points a game at Syracuse. If you go back and look at his numbers in New York State as a high school player, he might be the number one scorer in all of New York State history. And he was a tremendous, prolific scorer. When he got to Syracuse, and here's one piece of advice for anybody who's on the recruiting trail right now. Anybody who's on the recruiting scene and you're trying to pick a school, you're a high school coach, you're trying to pick it. Don't pick a school for your player where the coach has his son playing for it. And he might be in the same position as your player. Buddy Boeheim was at Syracuse before Joe Girard decided to go there. I think you want to look at that and say, that's his dad. And his mom's in the second row. And so she's looking at dad, and dad's looking at her, and they got the son on the bench and say, "Oh, here he goes." And then the shot selections and all the different play calling and all the other stuff just seemed to miraculously go one way. So I think it was inevitable for Joe Girard to get out of there. I think him winding up with Clemson that has 50 points returning to it, and in Brownell's system, I think he'll do well there because they have that nice little weak side spot where they have that open shooter. And if they have him in that open shooter range, I think he can really do some stuff for them. But I think you're going to be okay down there in Clemson. South Carolina got a little something to be excited about. Obviously, football down there not going like it normally does for them. So something to be excited about on the basketball front, hopefully. The Duke Blue Devils, ACC, sticking in the ACC, out 14.3. Now that Again, this is where statistics can be a tiny bit misleading. Out 14.3, but it was Dariq Whitehead and it was Derek Lively, both NBA draft selections. So although it doesn't look like a lot on paper, it was a lot. But with Duke, they just reload. They're like a Smith & Wesson. They just take one bullet goes out, the next one comes right back in. And so back is 60.6. That's exciting for Blue Devil fans. It's why people have them picked second in the country and sometimes first. And when I wrote down new for them, I just wrote a ton. They have a ton of new players coming in. The top 25 is littered with Duke commitments. They've got a lot of good young players. Again, Coach Shire, ability to assimilate those players and for him to get into that deep NCAA run is going to validate him in the Blue Devil fans. If they keep getting some of those early exits from the NCAA tournament that they've had, I don't know how happy they're going to be. I really don't know how much, they're going to stick around. So now we go over and we're looking at Florida State with I've seen some people have Leonard Hamilton on a possible hot seat. I think that's crazy. I think Leonard Hamilton is a made man in our business and should be treated as such. Out there 30.6. Back they got 50 points. 50 points coming back. So I think if Leonard's got 50 points coming back, you'll see an exciting product out of them. The news, there wasn't a whole ton of new for them. But I like the fact that they got 50 points coming back. Here could be a sleeper team in the ACC. They have a new coach. Again, this coach was given the job, Damon Stoudemire. Damon had coached before at Pacific, went up to the NBA as an assistant coach with the Celtics, and then was hired at Georgia Tech. So they went to Georgia Tech with Damon Stoudemire, former great guard out of Arizona. I personally thought Georgia Tech should have went with my guy Kenny Anderson as their head coach, but they went with Stoudemire. I thought Anderson had a much better connection to their alumni, to their people, and would have really signified coming back and really making that program something special. I think Kenny Anderson's down at Fisk University right now, and some big-time coaches should give him a look, because if you surrounded him with the right people, players would want to play for him. I can assure you that. He's got that personality. He's got that great way about him. So any of you big-time coaches that are out there looking right now, look at Kenny Anderson down at Fisk University. He's doing some good stuff down there. But the Georgia Yellow Jackets have 33.1 out, and coming back they have 42.6. They have 4 solid players coming back who averaged about 10 points a game. That's how they get to 42.6. Pretty good, though. If you got 4 solid players coming back, you can make it work. Now, here's the other side. The new 9 new players. 9 new players. So we'll see how that works. They also have a UMass transfer there. What I started to write down also in some of these was when they looked at some of the transfers, what leagues were getting hit the hardest in the middle and lower range about their players going in and out. And Atlantic 10 looked like they were getting hit pretty hard there from just that brief analysis. The Louisville Cardinals, it's going to be bad in Louisville for a while. This is a program with Life Alert right now. They've fallen, they can't get up, and the Life Alert is in the other room. Part of the problem is you're in such a terrific league right now. Louisville would be better suited off to try and repair their program in a different conference than the ACC, because the other teams aren't going to stop running. The other teams aren't going to stop going hard. And when you're down like this, just like ask St. John's. Ask St. John's how long it took them to get back up after they had fallen. Ask some of the other programs that you look around and see, wow, that used to be a storied program. That used to be a great program. Look at the Big Five down in Philadelphia. Look at Penn's the best team in the Big Five. Penn might be the best team in the Big Five. Probably Villanova still, but I mean, those teams have taken a drastic reduction, and this is what we've been talking about on the show a little bit. This is the reality of it. So Louisville, they got 41 points out, and they had a terrible team last year. So the good news is nobody's back. The good news is nobody's back. The bad news and the good news are the same thing. So maybe you can start over. I don't know, but when you're losing that number, you're bringing 30 points back. New. They did, I think, at least I was happy to see this. They took number 58, number 68, number 70, number 72, and number 90 out of the ESPN Top 100. So they took 4 players in high school rather than go into the portal and try and do a quick fix. So I applaud that. I think you better get it going quick, though. I think you better going quick. Okay, Miami Hurricanes. I was a little surprised when I looked at this because I thought they had a little bit more coming back, but they do have Pack and Ormir, who are two probably NCAA, all conference candidates, going to be given some national recognition, and I think are probably, I would have Ormir probably in the top 20 right now, and Pack probably would be draftable as well. So, but I was a little surprised. 38 goes out. They're going to miss Wong. They're going to miss Jordan Miller. Those two really good players. They're going to miss those guys. And then back, they have 42.7, though. That's pretty good. But most of it resides in those two gentlemen's hands. Most of the 42 points resides in Pack and Ormir's hands. So we'll see how it goes. UNC, okay, Carolina. They have, they've been quiet. They haven't made a lot of big splashes down in Carolina. But I'm going to give Carolina fans a little reason to be hopeful here. All right, Armando Bacot returned. He's a stud. You can build around him. The guard came back. R.J. Davis came back. You signed a young man named Elliot Cadeau, and he is a pass-first point guard that they haven't had the likes of there since Jimmy Black and Phil Ford. This young man really likes to pass the ball. So I think he can sort of ignite their offense a little bit. But here's two pieces that have been quiet. Cormac Ryan from Notre Dame is really good. This young man can really play basketball. And in North Carolina's system that they've employed for many, many years, I think you're going to see this young man really, really do well. And they also have Harrison Ingram, who transferred in from Stanford. Both of those young men are going to be pretty good ACC players. So if you bring back Bacot, you have Davis, you added a really mercurial, exciting new point guard, like when they had Kenny the Jet Smith, I think that this Carolina team might surprise, might do well. They're picked pretty well, but I think in terms of them as a program and their ability to hold up the onslaught that's coming out of Durham and Duke right now, I think that's in question. I think right now they're trying to stay afloat, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing right now. The same action around those programs is not the same thing. North Carolina State Wolfpack. All right. This is a guy who I would say might kind of be on the hot seat. All right. Cates came over, hasn't done anything, hasn't really done much. Okay, but out goes 56.3, and they were okay last year. He returns 31.7, and they've taken 7 players out of the portal. So when you're looking at it, this is why we're looking at it from this respect. Is that program healthy? Is that program deleterious? Is that good for you? Is that bad for you? I think it's bad for you to have that kind of rollover. I think it's going to be, especially in the ACC, they're going to feel it. But at least their body mass indexes are where they're supposed to be. They're in really good shape down there, I hear. Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I wanted to cover this one, Pete, because this is the team that I alluded to, out 74.2. Not only that, 2 of the players are winding up playing for teams in your league. Your 2 best players left and now are on. So it's like an add, and all you do is subtract. You're losing players, and then the other teams are adding them, and they were better than you to begin with, and now they're getting better with your players. And so that's going to be rough for Notre Dame. I hope Coach Shrewsbury's got a long-term contract, because we're looking at 74.2 going out the door. You know what comes back, Pete? Hold your ears. 1.7 points returning to the Notre Dame Irish. The new is, I think they got a new leprechaun. That's the new. I think they got a new leprechaun. Pittsburgh Panthers, okay? Jeff Capel, we talked about him a little while ago. I'm not a big fan of this guy's, to be honest with you. I think he survived here long enough because of the length of his contract, and now maybe be able to kind of calibrate the program a little differently. But he's had some other jobs where he hasn't done well, got another job after not doing well at a job. And, so now, but I think, they may be okay, but they're going out 54-7. They had a pretty good team last year. They're going out with 54 points. They're bringing back 28.3. Their news are, okay. There's nothing, exciting. They got a couple of Atlantic 10 transfers. And this is the whole thing about the portal that I don't get. You know, why are you taking, if you're Pittsburgh and you have the opportunity to sign top 100 players, why are you taking a player who clearly was nowhere near the top 100 when they were in high school, during their collegiate career, and they're just littering their teams with guys from these lower conferences that I don't know how many have actually panned out. Go back and look at all the 5 of the St. Bonaventure players that left St. Bonaventure. Not one of them had the same year that they had the year before at St. Bonaventure. Not one of them had the same year. Kyle Lofton, Osun, not one of them had the same year that they could have had. Now, they all got paid, but not one of them had the same caliber year that they could have had previous year that they had at St. Bonaventure. It's sad. But they're coming back, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Here's Syracuse with Coach Autry. One programmatic change that I think is going to be very, very helpful. They dumped the 2-3 zone. Thank God. In my career as a basketball coach, I'd like to think that I maybe spent maybe 1/1,000,000th of the time as a coach in a 2-3 zone. I would like to think that I spent 1/1,000,000th of my time there in a 2-3 zone. It's not a good defense. It doesn't have accountability. It doesn't lend to good team camaraderie and play. And for years, watching Syracuse sit in that 2-3 zone used to drive me crazy. You're down by 15 points, and you're in a 2-3 zone. You're down by 20 points, and you're in a 2-3 zone. Your chances of coming back from that are not good. Your chances of making that run from a 2-3 zone are not good. I like the fact that Autry came in. He's going to put his own stamp on this. And his teams didn't play 2-3 zone at Syracuse. When he played there, they didn't play 2-3 zone. They were man-to-man organization. The 2-3 came along a lot later. He was probably sitting there on the bench begging Boeheim to get into some man-to-man coverages, to get out of that zone and actually play some defensive basketball. But now he's going to change it. They have a good backcourt, but they don't have much else, to be honest with you. One of their big men left and wound up at West Virginia, which is going to help West Virginia. But they have Judah Mintz, who's a very good player, probably a first-round draft pick. They don't have a whole lot. You know, their recruiting has not been good in the last few years under Boeheim. So by Autry taking this job, I hope he got a long contract because, again, they've kind of fallen. And we'll see if they can get back up. But Syracuse ain't what Syracuse used to be. Syracuse isn't what Syracuse used to be. I don't know if the ACC shift out of the Big East had a whole lot to do with that, but Syracuse basketball right now ain't what it used to be. And I got news for the people up in Syracuse, New York. I don't think it's coming back anytime soon. I think you're now in the ACC, and because of football and because of the changes you made there, you've destined yourself. You could have been a really good Big East team, stayed in the conference with all those great rivalries, and you could have handled your football program possibly in a different way. But by moving your basketball program into the ACC and now having it positioned in the place that they are, they're going to be they're one step away from life alert, in my opinion. Now, hopefully, I like Autry, but he's never coached before in his life, and it's going to be a situation where they're going to have to make some really, really drastic things happen in order to get that going. Going to have to do some really, really drastic things in order to get it going. Out is 34.4. Back is 43.1, but it's in two of those guys' hands. Two of those guys' hands. I think Pittsburgh adding Spradling is going to help them a little bit, though. Again, a Notre Dame poach. Virginia Cavaliers, I don't know. They're another program that had some great success. They seem to be in this whole portal thing and in this whole NIL thing, not equipped in the same way that some of these other teams are. I'm not sure the reason for that, but they're certainly not at the top of the conference like they have been, and certainly not going to be up there this year. Sorry, Cavalier fans, but here we go. Your out is 50.7. Your back is 20.2. And you're new. You have four new players, you know, and they're all and most of them are all transfers. So that kind of signifies where they're at a little bit. When you think you need help, you bring in immediate help. When you think you have time and you got a good team and you can keep growing, you bring in guys. When you have no choice, like Louisville, you bring in the guys you can get. I thought Louisville did okay there with getting 4 top 100 guys, though, because I think those 4 top 100 guys, hopefully they'll be there for a real long time. But, you know, that's not going to – they can get poached just as well too.
Sure.
Okay. The Virginia Tech Hokies out 38, back 47. They have one new recruit and 3 transfers. Wake Forest Demon Deacons out 39-5, back 47-6. It's a good number for the Demon Deacon fans. Got a good coach down there. They're basically have 7 new players, and so they're deciding to kind of split their losses maybe or split their wins, depending upon how you cover it. But they're going straight up with 3-4. They have 7 total. They're going 3 high school players. They're going with 4 transfer recruits. So it'll be interesting to see how that all maps out. Again, none of these transfers, are knocking it out of the park, in my opinion.
Right.
None of these transfers are going like, wow, that's really changing the whole spectrum of things in your conference, or that's really changing the spectrum of things in the league, in the whole top 25. I don't see it, but a lot of movement. A lot of movement. The Butler Bulldogs, let's get into the Big East a little bit. This team was terrible. They lost 58 points. They got 9 back. Okay, Butler, you might want to buckle up. You might want to buckle up. This is going to be a roller coaster ride, and I want you to buckle up. I want you to put that seatbelt on because it's not going to be pretty. Okay, Tad Matta is back there, the old Ohio State coach, but I sometimes wonder as they go through a program, when you get into a program situation, sometimes maybe they realize it ain't great either. And so we need a placeholder. And so they brought in the old Ohio State coach, Tad Matta. Maybe he's a placeholder. I don't know. I don't see anything going on down there that turns this thing around. All right, how much time we got, Pete?
About 3 minutes.
All right. I'll go a little bit deeper into the Big East, and then we'll save the rest for next. This is a team I'm very high on. Again, we talked about Derek Kellogg being out there as assistant coach, but I really like Greg McDermott as a coach. Their recruiting's been terrific, and I think he's one of the best offensive minds in the business. So Creighton goes out with 27-2. They do have some missing pieces there that were integral, but they bring back a lot. They bring back 41 points, and they got some really good players coming back. So I think they have one of the best 1-2-3 punches in the business. I think they have one of the best 2-3 punches. They bring back Kalkbrenner. They bring back Trey Alexander, who people talked about as being a first-round pick. And they also have Baylor Shearman, who's a really good player as well. I think 1-2-3, that's really good. If you can go 1-2, you got something going on. You're like a boxer, right? You can go 1-2, 1-2. If you can go 1-2-3 and mix up your combinations, that's a little more exciting. Here's another one, folks. I don't want to get your hopes up, but you don't have any hopes down there because you've been in the basement for years. This is another St. John's program. When I was a kid, DePaul was in the Final Four with Ray Meyer, and he had his beautiful carnation, and he was a Chicago guy bouncing around. They have hit the deck, and they have not gotten up in 20 years. And this isn't the year, folks. I'm sorry. They are the Blue Demons. They are the Blue Demons, and the Demons out 64, big number, and they had a terrible year last year, and back is 26.5. Their splits, they're bringing in 7 new players, and their split is 2-5. All right, let's roll it there. We'll hang on, and we'll pick back up with that as we move into next week. It gives us something nice to carry into next week. Also next week, I want to talk about, they listed out on ESPN. Again, I love them. I think that they're exciting the way they cover college basketball, especially in print. And there's some stuff out about the best teams of all time, the best college basketball teams of all time. And so next week we'll finish this and we'll jump into the best college basketball teams of all time. I wanted to say thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you to everybody. Yeast, you got your shout out. So I hope you listened all the way to the end because I just gave you another one. The best softball player I ever played with, the only guy ever to hit the ball over the fence onto the tennis courts in Seton Park in the Bronx, and we'll leave it with that. Have a great week. We'll be back next week and see you then.